I'm going to give you a little demo on two very common two-strand cast-ons. This one is probably the most common of all, this one in white here. This is the long tail cast-on. And this one here is a close cousin. This is the German twisted cast-on. I have started by putting a slip knot onto the needle just to hold the yarn. And this is the short side here. This is going to go over my thumb, and this is going to go over my forefinger. The most common way to hold the yarns is like this, with your fingers between both of them, and you bring your needle through the bottom of the yarn coming over the thumb, and then over the yarn coming over the forefinger. And you just do this over and over again. And what you're essentially doing is, this right here is a half hitch, this loop here, and you're grabbing it and you're immediately knitting it with the yarn over your forefinger. So you essentially have knitted your first row right now. Now I'll demonstrate the German twisted cast-on, which is a close cousin of the long tail cast-on. And I believe it's superior. It's a bit more elastic, and that's just because it has an extra twist in the structure. But it's a little trickier. The starting position is exactly the same as long tail cast on, except rather than going through this leg of the stitch, we're gonna go further down and dip down and grab that leg of the stitch. Then we're gonna pull our working yarn through, and then we're gonna let go of our thumb and we're gonna tighten like so. So I realize that's more complex. I'll go through it a few more times. Again, long tail would be this one. We don't want this one. We're gonna put our yarn under and then like so. Yarn, and it's important to not grab the leg like this or you'll get all tangled up. You wanna go under it and then grab the working yarn. So here's a little bonus. This is a slight variation on the kinetics of the traditional ways of doing these cast-ons that I think is better. First, let me show you, let's review the original one. So long tail cast-on, mounting like this, and I'm gonna just do a bunch of stitches to show you what we get. So if I do like 5 or 6 stitches, look what's happening to my yarn here. It's starting to unply. I don't like that. Now there's a simple solution for this, which is to twist it the other direction. If it becomes unplied when you loop it over your thumb from the bottom, it will actually get tighter if you loop it over your thumb from the top. Now I'm gonna mount it over my thumb like so. Comes over the top of the thumb rather than the bottom. And I'm gonna grab this yarn and then the working yarn. I might have to keep repositioning my thumb, but that's okay. It's not that big a deal. I'll try to. Now, let's look at see how it's not coming unplied this time? It's just more satisfying to me. So I do the same thing with this when I do the German twisted cast on. And I bring it over my thumb from the top, and actually, because of the structure, I have to twist my finger around like this, grab that loop. All right. I've gotten used to doing it this way, and now I honestly find it easier to do the German twisted cast on like so. Okay, so that's just my little variation. Now, one thing I want to tell you about these two-strand cast-ons is that you can do them as a single strand cast-on and then knit the second row, rather than knitting it with the strand coming over your finger. So just to compare, I'm gonna give you this visual example here. So here is This top one was worked as 2-strand, and the bottom one was worked as single strand. And you can see the bottom one is ever so slightly looser. And that's because those loops are actually over the needle, as opposed to you're pulling with your thumb until it feels like about the right tension. Pretty much invariably, it's going to be a little bit more elastic and a little looser if you do it as a single strand. Here is the single strand version of the long tail cast on. And if you look at the difference here, this one is definitely looser. This one is not really a great cast on. I'm showing it to you for illustration purposes that the long tail cast on breaks down into a half hitch loop cast on plus a row of knits. However, the German twisted cast on top, the first row is a double twist loop cast on, which is actually a great cast on. So let me show you these two things. Okay, so just a quick review of the 2-strand version of long tail is that you essentially have a half hitch and then you knit that half hitch right away. So if you do it as a single strand, let's just use the thumb strand here. If you did a single strand, you're just going to do the half hitch and you're not going to work it. So see that? Easy as that. And you can do it either coming out of your thumb this way or this way. It really does not matter which. Okay, and then once again, quick review of German twisted cast on. The 2-strand version is to take this loop, bring the working yarn over, and then you have the you're knitting a full hitch there, not a half hitch. There's 2 twists in that thumb yarn. So you can just drop one of the strands of the other and simply do that loop. There's several different ways you can do this loop. If you have trouble keeping track of which way it's wrapping around your finger, you can try it a couple different ways. Just look at the loop as you're tightening it and make sure it's 2 twists as opposed to 1 twist. That's a half hitch, whereas that is a full hitch. And the extra twist gives it more elasticity. I have cast on 10 stitches of each. This is the half hitch and this is the full hitch or double twist. Okay, first I'm going to work these half hitch stitches. Single loop cast on. I'm just going to slip this off. That's the slip knot. All right. What you're going to see is that they're kind of squirrely to manage. See, like the very first stitch, I'm having a hard time. Okay. There's not a lot of elasticity in these because it's just one quick loop around. And if I'm not careful, I'm going to pull out this slack as I go across the round, a row or whatever. See how it's... So the half hitch single loop cast on is a tricky one as a single strand cast on and not necessarily one that I recommend. Get to the end of these 10 stitches. Let's see what we've got. All right, there's the 10th. So I have been really careful to not pull too much on that bottom as I work across, because I've had a lot of practice at this, but it is really tricky to do. And if you look at it, it looks pretty good, but you saw that I was kind of struggling to keep it tidy. Okay, so I'm going to drop this. Actually, I'm going to leave that one on. This is the slip knot. Okay, now I'm going to work the double twist cast on. And this one I find generally easier to slip my needle in, and also it holds its shape better. I don't have to work quite as hard. Oops. I don't have to work quite as hard to keep those to keep that very first cast on row from distorting. Oops. Okay, and there's my slip knot. So let's take a look. Here's the single loop half hitch, and here's the double loop full hitch. And see that extra twist? That means you're going to have more elasticity and a little more strength.